This week's big review is going to be a long one, so strap yourself in. Thanks to Best Service for sending me a copy of The Orchestra by Sonuscore. Do check it out at the Best Service website, they're good guys. Now, there have been a few notable orchestral toolkits released over the years which allow you to play an entire orchestra by pressing just a few keys. Sonokinetic do them, Kirk Hunter as well, and of course you've got the classic Symphobia collections. They all take a good stab at bringing a playable orchestra just to your fingertips. Now you can add Sonuscore's The Orchestra to that list, and I'm going to check it out here. This runs in the full and free versions of Contact Player 5.6.8 and above, and it's almost 7 gigabytes in size, which is quite slim, quite a small footprint for a huge orchestral library. The major sections are all covered here. You've got strings, brass, woods, percussion and a choir as well. And as well as the playable patches, the main selling point of this library is the orchestra engine, which throws these samples into an automation script with 3 complex arpeggiators and 2 automated envelopes. The easiest way for me to explain this is to show you how it works in practice. There are 3 types of orchestra presets and you get to edit them and make your own as well. So let's look at the most basic one first. The 60 orchestral colours presets stack up to 5 patches together, but normally it doesn't use the arpeggios or envelopes. You can see which instrument patches are being used and change the octaves as well. The 3 windows at the bottom of the interface give access to the ARP engines and a mixer for volume panning and reverb of the individual sections, along with EQ, compression and a few other controls. Then you've got the 60 orchestral rhythm patches, which use the ARPs and the envelopes that I mentioned before. They're shown here on the engine page, and you can change the settings of these, including how the ARPs choose notes, their rate, transposing the repetitions that they use, and a whole bunch of other controls. The mod wheel controls the overall dynamics of the sound, and you can literally play a 3-note chord and the ARPs and envelopes will take over, following the notes that you play, creating a whole dynamic orchestral section. It's also possible to assign different ARPs and envelopes to each of the 5 sections. Lastly, the animated orchestra patches are similar, but they mix orchestral sections together and are focused on particular themes. There's also 60 multis which pull together multiple instances of the orchestra to create even more complex sounds. So I hope that gives you a basic idea of how the orchestra works in practice. Now let's talk about some of the specifics that I liked and disliked. The use of the arpeggiators and envelopes in the engine is very clever. Now the interface is well laid out and it's easy to understand, so it's pretty easy to see what's going on with these controls. I have to say though, the text is absolutely tiny. It's a little bit difficult to see that. The interface is streamlined too, it hasn't got too many unnecessary options, and all of the most basic articulations are covered, but there's nothing fancy here, so there's no harmonics, there's no bartoks, no overblown winds or anything like that. Now regarding the sound of the actual samples, I'd say these were very competent, but they're not outstanding. I did notice a few noises at the end of samples, and some, I'm afraid to say, are just downright unrealistic. Yes, oboes, I'm looking at you. But for the most part, they do the job they're supposed to, and although they don't have very many dynamic layers, they're pretty good, they're competent. Ironically, I think the percussion is actually the best of the lot, even though it doesn't feature on many of the preset patches. It's also worth knowing that the sounds have been recorded in a relatively dry environment, and then there's added reverb in the engine to put them into a space, but there's no options for microphone mixing here. The orchestra has a distinctive sound and might not blend so well with your other libraries. Now, this is due to the lack of microphone options, as I mentioned before, and limited onboard reverb choices. This does become especially annoying with the multi-patches, where you have to go into every one of the multiple instances of the orchestra and change the reverb settings to your taste. You might find yourself having to use a soundstage effect or additional reverbs to push the rather upfront sound back into the hall. Now I want to talk about the expression. Try as I might, I couldn't find a way to map the mod wheel, which is used for expression, to my foot pedal or any other MIDI controller, not without adjusting the MIDI values in Kontakt itself, which of course is then going to mess up a lot of my other template. This did become a big issue when I wanted to play big chords with two hands, as I couldn't automate the dynamics live, and I had to draw them in later with my DAW. So in conclusion, despite my misgivings about some of the samples, the pretty titchy text, and that you can't reassign the expression, the orchestra is pretty good, and I'd probably use it a fair bit for sketching and background textures. It's way more flexible for chords than something like Cinesample's CineAurc, and gives more options for arpeggios than some of the phrase-based libraries out there, such as Action Strings. Having said that, the price you pay is realism. Now, buried in a mix this won't be an issue, but the distinctive sound could be a problem, and the lack of microphone positions as well do give me a second thought about this library. Undoubtedly, the orchestra will be a time saver for those on a deadline, and the multis can spark really interesting ideas, but you have to balance that against the €400 price tag that they're asking, and the fact that lots of other lazy composers might be using the same presets and patterns. For more information about the orchestra, do head over to the Best Service or Sonuscore websites. Thank you so much for watching. That's just a small taste of the Samplecast, a weekly podcast and YouTube show for sample library geeks and plugin enthusiasts. You can find out more information at thesamplecast.com. Don't forget to subscribe.